It's easy to forget that MCP is just like 6 or 7 months old. It's just this thing that's been brand new in the world. It's just a baby. It's learning how to walk. So there's a tremendous number of things that it's missing for enterprise adoption. One of those things is auth. It's like how you log in. If you imagine using MCP in the workplace for like enterprise type of thing, it's got to know who you are. It's got to have some type of state that it can log in with. Don't just take your API and turn it into MCP. Because
Right.
you want to think through the tools and capabilities, not just resources, endpoints that you would have with REST services. And so I think the way that will emerge is it not as like a brand new clean sheet authorization model. It will emerge as an evolution from what we have today. And that's really how all technology gets built.
Hey everyone, welcome to Future Proof. Today I talk with Michael Grinich, founder of WorkOS, and we cover a wide range of topics from what it means to be MC-pilled to what's missing from the MCP protocol and services out there today to make it ready for enterprises and production-ready agents, and how you should be building your app today if you want to be prepared for a world where most of your users might be agents and not humans. So stay tuned, there's a lot to cover. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Future Proof, building AI products that last. Today, I'm joined by Michael Grinich, CEO and founder of WorkOS. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you.
Awesome. So many things I want to talk about today, MCP, agents, there's a lot going on. But recently, WorkOS hosted an MCP demo night here in SF. Wanted to hear about how that was for you and what are some of the coolest demos that you've been seeing with MCP.
Yeah, it was an absolute blast. We called it MCP Night, and we hosted it at the Exploratorium, which is this cool children's museum, science museum. We thought it was going to be pretty small. The auditorium fits a couple hundred people. We had a bunch of our staff there. We had over 500 people show up. There's a line down the block. So there's clearly at least a demo event product market fit with MCP today in San Francisco. The reason we did that event was really to bring together people that are building at the forefront of AI and these agentic and LLM systems. And we had demos and talks from people from Vercel with their new AI SDK that supports MCP, Cloudflare with their agents SDK as well, their MCP integration, people from Sentry, Browserbase, Postman has built some cool MCP stuff. So really quite broad across the board, and a bunch of startups too. And I think what was really exciting was not just these companies are investing in MCP and building things, but a bunch of small companies too. We had tons of founders in the audience for that event. This is an absolute blast. We are actually doing it again. We just announced it's going to be on August 7th again in San Francisco at an even bigger venue. If you missed the first one, make sure you come to the second one. It's going to be even better.
I actually did miss the first one, but I will definitely be at the second one. I was sick, unfortunately, but yeah, I am there and very exciting. Thanks for sharing about that. I wanted to ask you, since you've seen so many of the sort of MCP demos at this point, when I see content about MCP online, a lot of times it's people doing those demos, like maybe it's in locally running Claude MCP servers or basically just a terminal-based demo that they're just sharing cool things that they've built. What do you think is the next step, or what do you think is the thing that's preventing those demos from breaking into enterprise apps or just real production-ready agents? What do you think that there's something that's missing, and what are those things that people should be looking out for?
There's a lot of stuff missing from MCP, and everybody knows it. The developers know it, the folks working on the protocol, the steering committee, the folks at Anthropic. I've met with a bunch of them. They know it too. It's easy to forget that MCP is just like 6 or 7 months old. It's just this thing that's been brand new in the world. It's just a baby. It's learning how to walk. So there's a tremendous number of things that it's missing for enterprise adoption. One of those things is auth. It's like how you log in. And this was recently added in the last few months with the oAuth 2.1 extension. And then there were even more recently a bunch of bugs and issues fixed with it around how it worked with resources. And so there's been these kind of fundamental gaps in the protocol. I don't even know if I'd say it was an issue previously. It was just a missing thing. And if you imagine using MCP in the workplace for like enterprise type of thing, it's got to know who you are. It's got to have some type of state that it can log in with. So I think we're just building up these layers. If you look at the early internet, it was many years before we developed encryption. That HTTPS, the S in your URL bar, it used to just be HTTP. All websites were unencrypted. That was the standard. How email worked was unencrypted as well between machines. It took us a long time before we actually said, hey, maybe there should actually be some security model inside of this. And so I think what we're seeing with MCP is it has the same type of gaps as other protocols that are developed. We haven't added those things too early, but what's going to happen and what's already happening is like a rapid addition of those capabilities because there is hunger and excitement by companies that want to use this that are larger. And because they're larger, they have actual like security concerns around it before they're actually going to adopt it. So while it's a gap today, I would say it's probably closing faster than people might even realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree with you on the auth piece, and really glad that OAuth is now a standard. It's a part of the protocol now. I think that's something that we see a lot of interest for. Paragon recently launched an MCP as well. And part of that is actually to prompt users to follow an auth flow to connect an integration if they don't have it connected already. I think one concern that also comes up in addition to auth is just the right review process to authorize kind of the tool selections that MCPs offer, and making sure that the whatever agent is seeing those tools tells the user like what's going on and is able to explain the operations it's about to take. I feel like that is also very much in its infancy from like a user experience standpoint. I'm curious, do you think that that is going to evolve in some ways, like beyond kind of the allow once, allow always type of dialogues that we're seeing in current MCP clients?
Yeah, you're totally right. There's nothing really in the spec today about authorizing different tools or different approval flows. It's still the Wild West. And we at WorkOS talk with a lot of companies about this. We've built some cool authorization stuff around MCP for customers. You can use our products to put identity and auth in MCP servers. So we're seeing people do this today. We're working with them. But once you're connected, it just gives you everything. You get all the tools immediately, or all the resources, or just like the full. It's left as an exercise to the developer to add any sort of authorization there. Again, the folks working on the protocol understand this. A lot of what they're trying to do, I think, is make it up to the clients. So whether it's Claude desktop or Goose or ChatGPT or whatever MCP client you're building, an agentic system interfacing, it's up to that agent to figure out how it should parse through tools, how it should actually combine them together. And it's honestly the model as well, the LLM model, with the tools that are exposed to it, how it chooses to reason and compose those together. And as the reasoning models get much, much better, perhaps it'll be the clients and the reasoning models that are actually doing the kind of security around the tool selection. I think it's too early to say. If you look at how fast the reasoning models have been improving, perhaps what you actually want is something closer to like a agentic system determining the permissions versus like a hardcore set of like static permissions that are given around resources and tools. And so that's something that's in this wait and see stage, I would say, right now. And it's probably like a good thing that the MCP spec hasn't been too prescriptive about it. I'd say my reaction, I've been very impressed with the steering committee around MCP. They've been doing a fantastic job at reflecting back on what the community is building and having it be a community-led effort to develop things. If you're curious about this, just go read the GitHub issues. It's really great what they got there.
I'll have to take a look. Yeah, definitely some exciting things evolving rapidly on the protocol level. I'm curious for our listeners who are AI builders, who are preparing their apps to be AI ready and future proof. Should they prepare for this future? Should they be building MCPs themselves? Should they be developing these approval flows in their own clients? How should we think about this if a lot of the underlying foundations, like the protocol itself, is just changing from underneath you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm not sure. My off the cuff recommendation would be do whatever it takes to create a great product experience. Do whatever it takes to actually solve true problems for users. Try not to get too bogged down in the standard, what's capable today, what it might change in the future. One of the limiting factors for sure is the client support around MCP. These MCP servers might have a bunch of new things, or there's new, if you've seen the new stuff in the spec on elicitation, which is really fantastic capability. But we got to wait for the clients to actually implement this. It's like new capabilities in the browser being introduced, and then IE doesn't support it. So you got to have these hackarounds and shims and polyfills and stuff like that. It's going to be the same thing in MCP, again, just accelerated on a shorter timeline. So I would say at the end of the day, like the only thing that matters for end users is the actual experience they get with the product, what it allows them to do, what capabilities, what utility it gives them. I mean, I think even today, if I remember right, I think ChatGPT's MCP support, it doesn't even support prompts. I think it's just the tools and resources. Yeah, so it's like missing a core part of what's in the spec. They just haven't implemented it yet. If you're trying to build more of a commercial offering, actually for customers, perhaps for the enterprise, you probably want to do the opposite. You want to find something that has compatibility everywhere.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And then like from an infrastructure perspective, if listeners have a SaaS product that maybe even has an API or developer platform today, when should they start thinking about building an MCP server?
My canonical advice is always just go talk to users, see what they're building with it. It's pretty easy to experiment though today. I think in a day or two, most developers can play around with MCP, even if it's only to take their current API, take an open API spec and dump it into MCP. There's a lot of chatter and some pretty great blog posts about why this is not perhaps like a accurate or like the most exciting representation for an MCP server. Don't just MCP. I think there's one I read that was like MCP is not just your API. Don't just take your API and turn it into MCP. Because
Right.
you want to think through the tools and capabilities, not just resources, endpoints that you would have with REST services. Whether people are asking for it, go talk to them, see what utilities they want, what actually tools would be helpful, or build some of your own things. I think what I recommend people just do is try it. It's one of those technologies and I think ideas that it's a little bit hard to understand actually how powerful it is until you actually taste it and build something with it. And certainly it's happened to me. I've seen it happen to friends too. Call it getting MC pilled, where you just can't stop thinking about it. And that's why we're doing this big event in San Francisco, is to bring those people together. We have swag and merch we've made for it. It's taken on a whole life of its own. But I think it's just because it's really exciting and it's a new modality for building, really at the end of the day, software tools for people.
Yeah, I love that MC pill. That's
Yeah.
so funny. I need a shirt with that. Cool. I think shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to talk about permissioning in general. I think this is another big topic that we're seeing at Paragon. A lot of enterprise AI companies they're ingesting a lot of data. Of course, they need it for contextualizing the responses that they provide in their AI product or chatbot, making sure that the right documents reach the right people and don't get into unintentional access for others is a big problem. It's something that people are thinking a lot about. I think that sounds like WorkOS is also thinking a lot about that authorization permissioning model. Curious from your perspective, why are permissions uniquely challenging or an interesting problem just in the context of AI and maybe RAG search in general?
Yeah. In the previous era of like software development, there were a couple things that were different than AI products. One thing was that most apps didn't have that many kind of integrations with other services. If you built a tool for salespeople, you might need to plug it into the marketing tool or like an email integration or something like that. But it was relatively few, maybe two or three things you connect things to. And similarly, the things that were done through that integration were like declarative and known. So you might say, I need to connect it to my email system, and it's really just going to be sending email on my behalf. Like think about automated sales outreach, like a tool like SalesLoft or Outreach.io or something like that, right? So back in the day, it was just connect your email and it's just sending email on your behalf. Now with AI-based products, those same needs exist, but they're amplified. And so an AI agent system needs access to actually a bunch of different tools. It doesn't just need access to email. It needs access to email and your Salesforce and your recruiting tool and your marketing tool and your design tool and GitHub and Dropbox and like everything, right? So you have this explosion of capabilities that are needed inside of an application through integration. And then second of all, the behavior that it has is non-declarative, because as an agentic system, it can go off and do a bunch of cool stuff. It's pretty open-ended and flexible. And so it's very hard to actually take that agentic system and constrain it. We've seen time and time again when people try to have really strict prompts to get agents to behave in a certain way, that you can break out of that. This kind of prompt hijacking. And I don't think anybody has ever, still to this day, written like a perfect prompt that kind of fully isolates. It's almost like a game. How fast can you get the system prompt out of the latest ChatGPT model or what have you? And so depending on agentic behavior to be deterministic is not a successful path towards success. You have to assume that it's going to be non-deterministic. So you got more integrations. They can do more stuff and like non-deterministic stuff. And I would say the third dimension, which we're seeing as well, is there's just more of these AI products. It's a huge wave. It's like the explosion of mobile apps. So companies are needing to adopt a lot more of them. So you have this, it's a 3Xer, right? Where it's like harder to keep control of all the applications that have been adopted, hundreds of thousands of them, new products getting built, more integrations, and behaviors are unbounded. And I think the answer to this is actually probably something more around permissions, where you want to have a security boundary around how agents are built and how they're actually architected and integrated, and you enforce some level of security there, whether it's observability into the agentic behavior or the AI system's permissioning, what it's able to access, what it's able to do, more granular scopes. There's like a lot of different ways this could be expressed, but you're taking something that used to exist within the application that the developer is building and now putting it more into a layer outside of it, an integration layer, perhaps an agentic platform, a runtime. Could be something like Crew AI, could be something like inside of ChatGPT operators, it could be something like Paragon. I think everybody's seeing, or with MCP, right? Everybody's seeing this. It's these things that they've existed for a long time. Applications have always integrated together. Cloud tests have always had these plugins. I remember when I was worked at Dropbox when I was in college, you could connect your Dropbox to your Instagram account and have your Instagram pictures go into Dropbox. It was an integration, right? But now it's just the volume's been dialed up on those. And specifically in the enterprise, it causes security concerns. So it's not just on the consumer side what's concerning. In the enterprise, it's a real concern. And unbounded access to these sensitive systems could be a huge liability to organizations. So I think their concerns are rightfully placed. No one really has a solution here yet, though. I think it's just characteristically a hard problem. And I'm very interested to see what'll shake out. There's a bunch of companies working on it, and I'm personally just very curious about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another kind of knot in kind of what you described compared to those simple one-off OAuth integrations, like you can send email on my behalf, is one, agents themselves are a new type of actor in the system. There are these entities within your authorization model that are, like you said, non-deterministic, and they're also non-human. They just act on your behalf and need to be reviewed and audited and that sort of thing. But they're application users or service account users, but they also have their own sort of state and intent in terms of what it's doing in that system. So that's one, I think, twist to it. And then the other part is that I think with these agents, we're seeing a lot more, especially in enterprises, that an organization admin will authorize on behalf of everybody within their organizational directory. So I think we're seeing a lot more of those types of authorizations just in terms of I want to connect my Google Workspace once to ChatGPT, and then I want ChatGPT to actually respect those permissions across all of the users in my directory. That's a difficult problem, and particularly if if it's going to be autonomously operating over my Google Workspace, it better make sure that it respects all of the permissions that come with that particular service. Yeah, tons of complexity there. It's something that we're definitely looking at as well. And with our customers, that's something that comes up very often.
Yeah, most services don't have a way to introspect the permissions to actually externalize them. They don't have an API for it. The permission checks are just done on the resource lookups because it's per user. A typical API acts on behalf of you and respects your permission set. In the case of Google, you can get a service account to get org-wide access and then apply whatever permissions on top of that. Salesforce lets you do this too. And Salesforce actually has an API which you can query for the access levels for people. So you can get access to everything and then query the Salesforce API and apply it yourself to the data model. But most systems are not built in that way. It's not built in that way. Google's certainly not built in that way. Slack's not built in that way. So I think the way people design APIs or what they expose will also need to change for agents. And I'm talking here the normal kind of resource-based REST APIs versus MCP. Really, the whole thing is up for change. And that's why it's a really exciting time. I think the power of these agentic systems, the power of AI, is what's going to push through this evolution that we need around how data access happens. And what's really exciting is no one really has the answer yet. And it's all trade-offs. And I think it'll be a little bit like the browser wars for a while and early web software and cloud stuff. And it's just we're doing all that again 20 years later.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious. Last year, WorkOS announced it was acquiring the FGA database Warrant. I'm curious if that plays into your vision for this or how the problems you're working on at WorkOS. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, we acquired a small startup that was part of YC called Warrant, who had built some pretty cool open source technology for doing authorizations, like a permissions database, loosely designed around the Google Zanzibar paper that they had released around how Google does resource-based authorization. And since then, we've relaunched it and rolled it out to our customers, and people have started integrating with it and building things on top of it. It's pretty cool. It essentially is an external permission service, whereas in most applications, permissions live right next to the core data. It's often in the actual core data itself. With FGA, you can have this be a separate system. And you might ask, why would I ever need to do that? It's particularly helpful if you have multiple different data sources and you want to build a unified permission system on top of it. And you might say, when is that ever going to be the case? Why would I have a Postgres database and also a different database and a different database? It turns out it happens all the time if you're building one of these AI products, because you want to give the AI system access to all of these different external services that you might not actually have direct permissions for. And so you want to add an additional permissioning layer on top of it. And so you have all these different data sources, and you want to build a permissioning layer that's isolated from it, and then have multiple different types of users that can have permissioning on top of those resources. You need a database that just does permission representation and modeling. And that's what FGA is. That's really what that's for. That's how Google uses it as well. All of the relationship graph of all the entities of Google's products and systems live inside of their system in that way. So it's pretty cool. It's very complicated to use, I would say, just learning a new database. Imagine you were coming from the MySQL world and you want to learn MongoDB or something like that. It's a very big change. But with great power comes a lot of great benefit too. If you're able to go all in on it, it can really be a transformative way in how people think about data modeling and think about permissions in their app. Yeah, it's kind of it's like seeing the future. I think this is often the case when Google writes these papers, that Google has seen the accelerated future and we're all just trying to catch up as mere mortals in the rest of the world.
Yeah. No, I think FGAs are, what I love about them is that they distill down that complex set of business logic or permissioning, like complex hierarchies become a reachability query. It's can this user reach this resource by whatever in between relationships there might be, but it really distills it down into a really simple type of question, which can lead to really powerful API actually. Yeah, we're big fans of FGA at Paragon.
Yeah, it's cool. It's just a graph. Like at the end of the day, like the object representation is very simple. It's just these edges in a graph. And then when you query it, you're essentially doing a permission check, but it's really a graph traversal. And we have a version of FGA that you can actually run like in your cluster. So it connects to the WorkOS service, but it runs right next to your application service for performance. It's a super fast lookup. And so it's effectively like a read replica of your entire permission graph. And it just does it literally by storing an expanded version of the graph, like in memory, that you can query. So it definitely scratches the part of my brain that's all the computer science classes I took into kind of data structures and discrete math.
100%.
And it's interesting how powerful that ends up becoming and how many places you can apply it in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. More on the agentic, non-human user side of things, I'm curious if you have a vision or an idea of how auth or enterprise identity changes once agents become very common users of web apps, APIs, etc. Like, where do you see all of this going? Like, what will oAuth 3.0 with agent support look like?
Yeah, good question. How much time do we have? I've given a couple talks on this and around some ideas. I haven't really published much online. A lot of the needs for agent-based identity and authentication, really identity for these Gen AI systems or agentic applications, it's very similar to like identity for people. Because if you think about an agent going off and doing stuff for you, it acts like a person, but it might act on your behalf. It might act like a super intern or like a toddler with a chainsaw. Like it's not that intelligent, but it can go off and do things potentially destructive, potentially helpful. And so I think the way that will emerge is not as like a brand new clean sheet authorization model. It will emerge as an evolution from what we have today. And that's really how all technology gets built. All technology ends up becoming a layer. It's like cities. It's a layer on top of the previous rubble. If you go to Rome or Athens or something like that and dig down, you'll see all the old marble in the buildings from hundreds or thousands of years ago. And so I think it will be something on top of oAuth. We'll extend from there. We'll have these non-human actors in systems that will sort of they'll probably have an email address. They'll probably be represented in some way, similar to people, but behave in different ways. They'll probably have scopes in the same way people do. And they'll probably be like provisioned and deprovisioned in the same way that people are inside of systems. We'll leverage a lot of that existing infrastructure, the existing kind of layers that folks have. One of my favorite stories is if you've ever read why train tracks are the width that they are, rail train tracks in cities, it actually goes back to the distance between the wheels in the chariots of Rome. Because once that started getting built and once the ruts were in the road and people started making wagons, there's some things that just compound over time. The inertia to get out of that is too high and the benefit is too low. And so today still that's the width that's set. It's like a very specific kind of weird width and it's from those chariots. You could pluck a Roman chariot rider out and put him today on a train track and he'd probably be like, what, you guys are still using this? What the hell? I think it'll be the same thing with things like oAuth and passwords and MFA and different types of protocols. And the question is, how do we extend from here to there? How do we do it in a way that's smooth, that's backwards compatible, that brings as many people into the future as possible without throwing away all the things that we have that already work quite well? And I think that's where engineers and platform designers and systems thinkers. That's where you try to get in and be really clever and just think a lot and work on a lot of stuff. There's a bunch of different groups working on this. One group that we participate in is there's a OpenID Connect Foundation group that's working on just generally like identity for agents and agentic systems and Gen AI, but it's still really early in that stuff. And there's also a gazillion startups thinking about this too. So it's probably by the time this podcast airs, whenever, there'll even be more ideas about this stuff coming out. But I follow it pretty closely and just find it, if nothing else, just very intellectually interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe we'll need to have you back to re-record in a week just to talk
Yeah,
about
I was joking though. We're recording this in July, early July, and I feel like it's been a decade since January.
Yeah. Every week is like
Yeah.
a year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe as a final thought for our listeners, I'm curious, knowing that agents are just going to have more of a presence in our APIs, in our apps, what would you say, what advice would you give to builders to how should they shape their apps to anticipate that future? What are some of the things or changes you know that they'll need to make already, or things that they can do now to be prepared for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Maybe I'll give a couple examples, historical examples to think about this. So one thing that I think is notable, DocuSign as a platform, as a product company today, the e-signature company, years and years ago, 98% of their traffic was people going to DocuSign, uploading a document like PDF or Word file, and sending to somebody to get signed, saying, hey, here's the signature, here's where the block should be, here's their email address, go get them to sign it, and then handling that workflow. And then at some point, DocuSign released an API. And it turns out that the killer app for DocuSign is not DocuSign, it's whatever app it's integrated into. Because people want to sign it directly from that experience, whether that's a lease rental for an apartment or a business transaction or something else, right? And so today, like the very large majority of DocuSign's traffic, like over 90%, I believe, comes from their API service, and very little from people going to their website. So there's been that inversion in traffic. That's one thing that I think will happen with the AI agents and systems. So if you look at your web traffic today, most users going to certain web pages are humans. And especially if you're a consumer site ordering food or something like that, it's people going in and saying click. In the future, it might be mostly agentic users that look like people, but are clicking around in weird, fast ways and maybe doing things that you wouldn't expect. So that's the first thing, is just don't be surprised if that happens. And it's probably useful to have some type of alerting or tracking around that percentage increasing over time. And it'll be slowly and then all at once. It'll probably take just as long to go from 1% to 2% as it will take to go from like 20 to 50%. It'll accelerate. That second thing I would say is, as people are thinking about designing and building software, and this is really hard, but try to think through how to build it first for agents and people second, but actually sculpting your application. And we don't know what like agent-based software looks like yet exactly today. MCP is kind of a hint of it. But the parallel I like to draw is actually back in, say, like 2008, 2007, when the iPhone platform started coming out. And after that, you would have these consumer product companies that would build for mobile first, and then later build for desktop. And there were some of them that just like never built for desktop. They only started off building mobile. Like Instagram didn't have a web experience for a super long time. It was just, they didn't even have an iPad app. It was just the mobile app, just on iPhone. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are products or companies that are built entirely for agents, to start with. That's what we're seeing with MCP. Imagine a company that only serves their product through an MCP server, like that MCP.shop, that t-shirt store I mentioned. It's like only MCP exclusive. If you do that, there's certain types of access patterns or behaviors that you can create that you would never create before. And this goes back to just don't take your API and make it an MCP server. You have to rethink it, the platform fundamentals. Inside of MCP, stuff like elicitation and sampling, that doesn't exist in REST APIs. So it affords new capabilities. In the same way, if you build for iPhone first, everybody has a camera. You have GPS, you have these capabilities that didn't exist for web apps. And so that would be the other thing I would say, is for people building these products, thinking about them to be agent first or agent native. The only real way to tell is to be in it, build stuff, see where things are going, experiment with it. And it's kind of trying to cook with a new ingredient, a new flavor that's just been brought to your country. I learned recently that tomatoes are not native to Italy. Isn't that kind of crazy? They've only been there for like a few hundred years. That's actually not native at all. But I think about Italian foods, like tomatoes being like the thing, pasta sauce, like Nonna made or whatever. So you can go back and imagine there was actually a moment when tomatoes were introduced to Italy. and they probably rethought their cuisine and cooking and everything around that. And so as people are trying to think about what to build, I would say try to find the tomatoes, figure out what's new and what's coming. And the sooner that you can get some and start cooking with it and start seeing what it tastes like, the sooner you'll be able to create those new experiences and be at the forefront of what is enabled in this next wave. So I don't know what's going to happen, but that's at a meta level, maybe how to think about it. And I would say like my bet here is that this is going to happen. There's just so much momentum. Things like this don't happen that often. It's rare for new protocol or technology to get the same amount of enthusiasm it has gotten, like agents and MCP with developers. It almost becomes self-fulfilling. There was a great Hacker News comment a few weeks ago. I think maybe this was originally on the MCP spec. Someone was referencing it where it said, yeah, this spec, the MCP spec, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like, it's full of bugs and it has a bunch of security issues and it seems like it's a mess. I'm sure it's going to be just fine. I'm sure it's going to be great just because of the enthusiasm for developers. So any gaps in it right now, we'll figure it out. But I think that the TLDR it's just so exciting to be part of that. And so if people listening to this haven't tried building agents or haven't explored MCP, just go try, just go do it. And you'll probably see what all the fuss is about on the other side.
Yeah, 100%. And there's no lack of, like you said, there's no lack of tools or libraries out there to get started. It's so easy to just play around with and demo.
You can have Claude Code teach you how to do it.
Right.
It's like,
Exactly.
You can be like, hey, Claude Code, teach me, or Claude Desktop or ChatGPT, teach me how to build my first MCP server and interface with you. Self-referential. Yeah, there's not really an excuse.
Yeah, I think that's actually in the MCP docs, if I remember correctly. Like they just, when you're creating your first MCP server, they recommend, oh, here's how you can prompt Claude to help you
Totally.
build.
And that's a new thing too, as well, right? It's like learning in a different way, being like, oh, wow, I can just talk to this interactive thing to actually acquire this knowledge. Yeah, that'll make your brain spin a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Michael, really appreciate the conversation. We learned a lot. And yeah, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, and if you're MC Pilled too, come to MCP Night. We'll have some cool stuff, some great demos there. Hope to see you all there.
Night. All right. Thanks, Michael. We'll see you there. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this helpful, consider subscribing to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube to get all the latest episodes. And to view our past episodes, visit us at useparagon.com/futureproof.